Welcome to another Inside Carolina Scouting Overview. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Jason Staples. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Today it is the tight ends. Jason, this is a room that has been pretty stacked of late for North Carolina over the past 2 or 3 years. Freddie Kitchens, in his second year as tight end coach, will have some options here. We'll start first off with the transfer from Texas A&M, Jake Johnson.
Yeah, the thing you're getting with him is somebody who still has a ton of talent that hasn't been fully unlocked. You're looking at he was either the number one or number two tight end recruit in the country coming out of high school. Very well thought of coming out of the Athens area high school that he came out of. And you look at why, he's almost 6'6", just under 6'6", 240 pounds, has a lot of the kind of long, rangy build that you expect from a top-end tight end, and also really good top-end catching skills. Excellent ball skills, soft hands, does a solid job of being exactly what you expect for a big-bodied tight end at a high level. That said, he at Texas A&M did not produce at the level of a number one tight end in the country type recruit, though he was young, right? Your first couple of years, especially, there's that old rule of thumb: the closer to the ball you line up, the longer it's going to take you to be ready to play against grown men at this level. And you could see a lot of that with him at Texas A&M. There were times where when they asked him to line up and block bigger players on the edge, he got pushed around some. When they asked him to win one-on-one at times against SEC type defenders, there were times he just didn't win big in those one-on-ones. He made a number of contested catches, not too bad there. 4 of 9 contested catch opportunities, but just really didn't become sort of that plus level player, especially in the running game and as a blocker, that you would hope for with the guy with his frame and all of that at this point. But I look at him and I see a guy who his best football should still be in front of him, and I think that's with Kitchens and the group that they're bringing back at this position. He should be in a position where he can flourish at Carolina. He's got a chance to become a really good player.
When you look at Johnson, sort of Kamari Morales out, transfers out, Jake Johnson transfers in, but he joins a room that has had some consistency, like I mentioned, and John Copenhaver's a guy who Copenhaver is probably the least known of the room, or at least, I don't know, known as a thing because he's been a good player, but he's not the guy that would wow you the most, I will say that, on the outside looking in. But he's been solid for North Carolina. What do you see from him this year? How can he improve? How can he be even better on the field for Carolina?
So Copenhaver really actually sort of took over as the primary. The reason that we saw Morales transfer out as much as anything is that Copenhaver took his job. Morales was a good player, so let's be clear about that. Kamari Morales was a good player and a real asset to the Tar Heel football program for the years that he was in that program. Made some huge catches over the years. Was a reliable option. Didn't drop passes. Was pretty decent as a run blocker from the backfield H-back type stuff. But then Morales, he was a shorter, sort of stubbier player, didn't have quite the traditional tight end body for some of the inline stuff. And ultimately Copenhaver, I think, was a little bit more dynamic athlete with more size. And over time, as he got more and more reliable, he just started taking more and more snaps at that position. And, last year it was a 3-headed tight end situation, and the guy that got the most snaps of the group was Copenhaver. So, I think that says a lot, that he earned his way onto the field, even though you had Nesbit and Kamari Morales there already. Copenhaver found a way to earn himself onto the field and prove that he was the guy that belonged out there. Now, one of the reasons that he got out there initially as a redshirt freshman a redshirt sophomore in 22 was that he basically was a little bit bigger body and a more reliable blocker, especially in line from that position than the other two. I mean, Morales was more of a receiving tight end, and Nesbit is basically more of a wide receiver in a lot of ways than he is a true tight end. He's just, an enormous, big wide receiver. So Copenhaver became sort of by default the more well-rounded, sort of the more complete tight end with more of the blocking responsibility. And, back in 22, about 55%, just under 55% of his snaps were as a blocker. And, he handled himself pretty well in that scenario. The problem, though, is that last year he was not as reliable as a blocker. I thought he had a rough year last year as a blocker. And the Pro Football Focus grades sort of validate that. You look at his run blocking grade last year, 50.5, and pass blocking at 31.6. Those are not solid grades for a guy who you expect to be sort of the most well-rounded of your tight ends, who got on the field partly because he was a fighter and a guy who would block. So to me, the thing that he showed last year is he continues to catch the football at a terrific. That's pretty good. And not a whole lot of those targets are off target because he was playing with Drake May, right? So he's an effective receiver. He also, the thing last year especially, he showed a little more wiggle than you'd expect and a little bit more ability to elude initial tackles in the open field at times and to get some yak. So, he felt, 9.7 yards after the catch per catch last year, per reception. It's pretty good. From a tight end, that's really good. So did a lot of things as a receiver last year, actually improved in that area. But I thought he regressed a little bit as a blocker, got thrown around a little bit in line, and sort of like Jake Johnson, needs to really improve that aspect of his game. And, whichever one of those guys proves to be the more reliable inline blocker, the more reliable blocker in the running game is going to be the one that's going to get the most burn this year, because this is going to be a football team that's going to run the football a lot with Omarion Hampton and Darwin Barlow. So they're going to need those tight ends to be effective blockers on the field when they're on the field. Now, you can run the ball a lot of different ways. You can spread them out and go 4 wide and run the football. They may have to do some of that if these guys don't block a little bit better. But I think the potential to be a pretty good blocking tight end is there from Copenhaver. I think the potential is there from Jake Johnson. These are guys that have the frames, that have the ability to become that. They need a really good offseason, getting stronger through that lower half, getting a little bit more confident in their bodies, getting more physical, and then just to go out and play more physical football this year. To me, that's the step forward for Copenhaver, to go beyond being a good receiving tight end in the ACC to being a guy that actually starts to become a viable player for potentially some attention for the next level. And same with Jake Johnson. These are the things that they have to do to become complete players, so that they're more than just a big body that you can throw out there for some, third down, possession passing type stuff.
Let me ask you a couple things there. You blinked out on my end. Tell me the numbers again that you had catching the ball with targets with Copenhaver, and also how much of maybe his regression on the blocking side of it had to do maybe with his hand injury. He broke a hand during the South Carolina game, first game of the year. Did you see any of that being an issue with him and sort of aiding's not a right word to go along with the regression, but maybe causing some of the regression?
Oh, I absolutely think that was a factor. There's no doubt about it. He was not able to, blocking in today's football is about holding.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's about holding in a legal way. And this is one of the reasons, by the way, why I think it would actually be in like the NFL and college football's interest to change the name of the holding penalty, because holding is not illegal. You can hold all you want, but you can't hold in certain situations or in certain ways. You can't hold when your footwork is when your feet are in a wrong position. You can't hold and tug away from the frame. You can't get your hands outside. There's a whole lot of things that make it an illegal block, and that's what they should be calling illegal block instead of holding, because everybody sees, jersey stretch or a guy with hands full of jersey and they go, that's a hold. Well, yeah, but that's legal now, and it has been for decades. But I digress. When you can't hold,
It's tough to block.
well, yeah, that's going to be a factor. So, and you could see that, no doubt. That was absolutely a factor. But at the same point, you could see he also struggled a little bit in terms of positioning and maintaining his anchor against bigger players. And some of that is, again, the hand thing is a factor, but he's got to improve in that area.
What was it? What were those numbers again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, but even with a broken hand for one of those years, he's got 1 drop on 49 career targets. That's really, really good. So, and some circus catches out of that too. I mean, specifically, I'm thinking of the one against Oregon, where he just reached down and stabbed it with the one hand down below his waist. And that's an insanely difficult catch. I mean, especially for big guys to get down, bend down and get that, and then to do that with one hand and hold on and all that. That shows you the kind of hands he's got. So he brings a lot to the table. I would like to see both him and Jake Johnson become more physical blockers on the edge, like what they've got the potential to be, in order for this team to take the step forward that it needs. Because this team, with the running backs that they have, if the offensive line can stay healthy, we talked about that in a prior video. If the offensive line can stay healthy with the running backs they have, now all you really need to do is add the ability to block the edge with your tight ends, and then you become a really scary team running the football. And that's what they're going to have to hang their hat on this year. And that doesn't work quite so well if you can't handle the edge with those edge blockers. And these guys really need to take a step forward there. We already know they can catch the football.
Yeah, Jake Johnson, John Copenhaver there. More of your quote-unquote traditional tight ends. Another guy that we'll talk about in this tight end room, maybe not so traditional, maybe just a different, maybe borderline freakish, Bryson Nesbit. Jason, this guy can virtually do it all. Like you mentioned earlier, really a big wide receiver, but a guy that has a ton of talent.
Yeah, I mean, he is. I mean, we all saw Johnny Wilson and what Johnny Wilson did at Florida State the last couple of years, and going on to be drafted in the NFL. As a 6'6" and change wide receiver, 240-pound wide receiver that they lined up wide. There's a lot of similarities between a guy like that, Wilson, and Bryson Nesbit. Now, Nesbit, I don't think is quite as fast or as smooth as Johnny Wilson was. Wilson is more of a wide receiver than Nesbit. Nesbit is a little bit less fluid a player at that height and weight, but you're still dealing with the same kind of matchup problem for college secondaries when you put this guy out there, especially when you put him out wide. You put him out on the short side of the field as an outside wide receiver at just around 6'6". He's listed at 6'5" and a quarter, 230 plus pounds. I'd love to see him get to 240. Put him out there up against a corner who's 5'11", 190 pounds. That corner might need some help, right? I mean, what happens in basketball if you see that situation? You got your 6'6" guy being guarded by a 5'11" guy, and you got the high block or the low block. What are you supposed to do?
Get them the ball.
Get them the ball, right? You put it in his hands, and preferably you put it in a little bit higher because that guy can go and get it, and then he's going to be able to just shoot over him. Well, That's the situation that you get for Nesbit. He is a matchup problem when you get him against defensive backs. He's a matchup problem for most college linebackers because, again, you're looking at most of those backers don't have the length either. And most of the backers who do have the length or the bulk to body him don't have the speed to run with him. So he's a guy that you use as a matchup destroyer, essentially. And he's a red zone freak. He's one of those guys. He brings as a back shoulder guy, as a fade into the end zone guy, as a bringing the back of the end zone into play. You just throw it up, a little higher than the crossbar going into the back of the end zone and let that guy go get it. How many times did we see Drake May make that throw? Right? You just throw it up a little higher than everybody else, and if he doesn't catch it, it just goes into the first row. That's the stuff that this guy brings into play. He is much more of a receiver, more of a receiving tight end than he is somebody that you want to line up on the edge. He has at points survived and done reasonably well blocking. He's more of a positional blocker in that case. But, he's not normally the guy that you're going to line up at the H-back spot, in the sniffer and, run split zone and have him be the kick-out block. Can he do it? He has done it. But that's not maximizing what he brings to the table. He is that guy, though, that to me, looking at what they have at wide receiver this year, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see, if I were calling the plays, there'd be times where I'd have 3 tight ends on the field. And there'd be other times where I'd have, one of Copenhaver or Jake Johnson on the field, and then Nesbit on the field at wide receiver. Again, I'm just trying to maximize what I can do in terms of mismatches. And the other thing that you can do with that kind of lineup is that you can go to some condensed formations and things like that and bully teams. Because, get Nesbit blocking a defensive end, and that's not an ideal use of him. But if you're asking him to one-on-one block a safety or a corner, all of a sudden you got 6'6", 235 or whatever he's going to be coming in at. And that starts to be a problem for those guys, right? So you can start to do some things with condensed formations and all of that and run the football with that extra size on the field. And then you got a guy like J.J. Jones, who's not small, as your other receiver on the field. And you got a lot of beef out there. Nobody under 200 pounds on the field, right? That starts to look like old school smash mouth football pretty quickly. And if I'm calling the plays this year, I'm doing a lot of that sort of thing because of the versatility that a guy like Nesbit offers you. And I do think he's going to be a guy that a lot of pro scouts are interested in. That, he's going to have that interest because of his sort of versatility and that unusual frame and, ridiculous catch radius that, you feel good about. Again, for him, 5 drops on 118 career targets. Lower than 6% drop percentage, that's pretty good for, especially for a guy of his size and frame who, some balls that are catchable for him wouldn't even be catchable for another guy. So, you want to see him improve just a little bit more as a blocker. Last year, he was 54.5%, so 6 of 11 contested catch opportunities. Over 70% is elite. You'd like to see him, instead of 6 of 11, catch maybe 7 or 8 of 11. And this is marginal, right? That's the marginal stuff that one additional contested catch is a, contested catch on a fade route in the end zone. That is the difference between a field goal and a touchdown. And you win by 4 or you win by 3 or you lose by 2, right? Those are the things that determine a season. This is the sort of stuff where he can continue to improve. But again, I think the Carolina room here in terms of the tight end H-back room is one of the better rooms in the ACC, and certainly one of the more versatile and interesting rooms in the ACC that gives you a lot of different tools in the toolkit if you're the offensive coordinator.
Other contributors, we've talked about them across the board. They've got some freshman tight ends that are coming in, but I just don't see anybody else really making a massive difference, barring major injuries, when you've got 3 of this quality. Am I right there, or am I missing something?
Yeah, I agree with you. And part of that is, again, ideally, you don't normally want or expect a freshman tight end to step in and play a bunch because, again, you're starting to get closer to the ball, and it just takes a little bit for those guys to get ready to play grown man football. And so, it's a luxury for Carolina to bring those guys in and basically have a year for them to apprentice before any of them really has to do a whole lot in the offense. You can get some other, maybe some special teams out of them, maybe you redshirt one or two of them, but yeah, that's basically where that goes.
And you kind of went there when we were wrapping up the Bryson Nesbit section just a second ago. And we're talking with Jason Staples, Inside Carolina's expert here, on all his scouting overviews, specifically tight ends here. Final thoughts. Best tight end room in the conference. Is that safe to say? I freely admit, I don't know if I could possibly legitimately answer that question, but you watch a lot of football. If it's not the best tight end room in the conference, it's got to be up there, just like we were talking about.
I'd say it's one of the best four comfortably, with the potential to be the best. I haven't seen enough of this group to really to anoint them the best room, the best tight end room in the conference at this point. I think Miami's got a really, really good room in terms of talent. I think Clemson would probably take Brenningstool over any of the three that Carolina has, but I think Carolina's overall depth there is a little better than what Clemson has. So maybe that's a coin flip depending on what you want to be running and all of that. I think Florida State is probably pretty comparable. They really love the freshman they've got down there who's actually going to play. I mean, he was the top, I think, 2 recruit at the position last year, plus Morlock, who's coming back as a fifth-year guy, and he's 6'7". So yeah, I mean, I think it's right in the same tier with those three. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that, I mean, I don't know if you count Notre Dame in that mix, but they've got some guys there as well. So I would say it's comfortably in the top 4 or so, and could very well turn out to be the best tight end group in the ACC. But I haven't seen enough from these guys to prove to me yet that I would comfortably take them over anybody else's room. It's or over everybody else's room. I would say I would take them over almost everybody else's room without any hesitation. But there are a handful of teams that are basically in the same tier. It's one of the better rooms in the ACC for sure.
And it's going to matter who's throwing them the ball. We'll talk about that in a later video. We're not there yet. That's Jason Staples. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. You can go there. You can go online. You can go to East Franklin Street. Get your 10% off if you're a Tar Pit Premium message board person. They would outfit you. You could go to every Carolina football game with a different outfit from Johnny T-Shirt. And you could have your tailgate stuff. It could be all different every game. They've got so much to offer. And then Congruity, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels for your free assessment to your small to mid-sized business needs. They handle everything there. Local, national. Johnny T-Shirt, local, will do you national if you're not there. Jason Staples on the tight end room. I'm Tommy Ashley. It's been a UNC scouting overview. We'll be back again with another room. I think it might be the wide receivers this time. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Jason.